What do you think about Just Stop Oil going onto the pitch at Lord's?
I think a lot of people are losing sympathy with them because of the way that they're behaving. The other day, they had this big protest disrupting stuff outside a hospital, potentially endangering people's lives. It's not the first time that they've done that. Now this disruption at the cricket as well. I don't think they're doing the environmental movement any favours at all, because I think that people just will see that this is unreasonable behaviour, in some cases endangering people's lives.
Tell me about this health check that I'm going to get in the post.
Yeah, so a few years back, we brought in the NHS health check, which is like a sort of health MOT where we take people's blood tests, we take their blood pressure, and we work out if they're at risk of diseases. And it's been a big success. And people who do the health check are about half as less likely to die of cardiovascular disease as people who don't. But the problem is that only at the moment about 40% of people are doing it. And so we're bringing in a new digital version of it to make it much more convenient for people to do it, where you'll be able to enter a bunch of your details on your phone or on the computer or into the NHS app. And then you'll be able to...
You can do that already, though, can't you? I do that with my GP surgery already.
So in some places you can, and I did that myself when I did it the other day, but that's not everywhere. And the thing that you can't do is, I had to go into my GP surgery to go and give blood. In the future, as part of this digital check, you'll be able to do that in a convenient way at home and be able to do your blood pressure check in like a local pharmacy. And that will make it a bit easier for people to do it. So we think that there will be another 1 million people get these potentially life-saving checks as a result.
OK.
But it also free up some time for GPs. So it frees up about 20 minutes of time in general practice. That means more appointments, easy to get through. And it builds on the other things that we're doing, like the Pharmacy First service that we're bringing in at the end of the year, and just, you know, taking the pressure off of GPs by enabling people to get care in a really convenient way.
Thames Water's on life support. What are you going to do about that?
So in the first instance, this is still something for the companies themselves and their shareholders to sort out.
It's looking less and less likely, though, isn't it?
I don't know. I'm not privy to the company's financial information, but of course we do have contingency.
You read the papers?
Yeah, I do. I read the papers, and I see in the papers this morning that they are still in the process of finding further resources from their own shareholders, and that's the first place they should look to, obviously. Of course, the government does have contingency plans if this does become...
What are they?
A problem. At this stage, I'm not able to say what we would do exactly. It would depend exactly on the circumstances.
But the government would take Thames Water back into public control if needed, because a lot of people who are watching this morning are customers of Thames Water, and they're worrying about what's going to happen next.
Absolutely. And to reassure them, absolutely nothing is going to happen in terms of either their bills or their access to water. We have contingency plans, like we do in all these network utilities, to manage any difficult situations.
So the government would take back control as a last resort?
We absolutely have contingency plans, and they won't...
Would you take back control as a last resort?
...be a problem. It will depend exactly on what happens. At the moment, this is still hypothetical because they are private companies. They're in the process of raising more funds. And Ofwat last year was taking action to improve their financial resilience. In fact, the debt to equity of the water industry as a whole did fall last year. So they have been tightening the nut. They have been putting in new rules like, you know, you can't make any kind of payments to your shareholders if you're not meeting environmental criteria, if you don't have an investment grade credit rating. So the financial nut has been tightened on them over the last year. That has improved their resilience. But of course, if there is any problem, we absolutely do have contingency plans in place.
OK, I read in the paper this morning, I think it's in the Times, that 4 other companies are also, water companies are also being looked at by the government because they're not as stable as they should be.
Well,
financially.
Yeah, so there's speculation, of course, all the time in markets. When there's concern about one company, there's always people ask questions about other similar companies. But as I say, there has been action deep into last year to try and improve their financial resilience, and that to some extent has improved their financial resilience.
But it's an outrage. I mean, literally, they're handing out billions over a period of 20 years to their shareholders, and they've got all of this debt that they can't finance. And these people who are shareholders, it's not just like ordinary people like you and me. It's people, you know, like the Chinese involvement, Abu Dhabi involvement, Canadian government involvement, not government, pensions involvement.
Yeah. So on the other hand, they have also made about £190 billion worth of investment, and investment rates have been running about twice the level that they were pre-privatisation. And what's been happening...
So why are they dumping sewage then?
So what's been happening in recent years is we have discovered and we have been exposing the problem about these companies behaving badly and dumping sewage into rivers. When we came to office, only about 7% of these storm overflows were even being monitored. By the end of this year, it'll be 100%. And that is showing up and exposing deliberately that they have been behaving badly, and as a result of that,
so you're telling me on one hand how they're investing all this money, and then on the other hand how they're behaving badly.
The reason they're investing all this money is that we passed a piece of legislation in 2021, the Environment Act, which committed them and made them invest £56 billion in upgrading their networks so that we end this problem. Over the next 25 years, they'll be investing £56 billion. And even now, even in this Parliament, they're spending £3 billion, and they will be cutting the number of these overflows by a quarter by the end of this Parliament, by 2025.
Let's just mop up on this Daniel Korski thing. He hoped to be the mayor or candidate for the Conservatives here in London. He stepped down yesterday. Was that the right decision after this suggestion that he'd been groping a woman?
That was his decision and
the right
decision? So the allegation, which he denies, I have to be quite careful because he denies it.
That's not my question, Minister. All my question is, was he right on balance to have stepped back?
Yes.
Thank you. There we go, a straight answer. I love it. My goodness me, can somebody log that? Talk to me about the illegal immigration bill. We hear about it again in the courts today. Whoever wins or whoever loses, they can appeal. Will we ever see anybody sent to Rwanda?
Yeah. So the small boats bill, which we've already passed through the Commons, is currently in the Lords. And even last night, Labour and Lib Dem peers sabotaged one of the most important things in it, which
They didn't sabotage it, they just had their own view.
They voted it down.
Which they're perfectly entitled to do. That's not sabotage.
They're entitled to their view. But our view is we've got to stop the small boats and we've got to restore our ability to deport people who shouldn't be here, some of whom are serious criminals, by the way. And we are, through this small boats bill, taking action to take away that thicket of all these rules and human rights laws that are being used by all these people at the last minute to stop themselves from being deported. That's what we're in favour of. It will stop the small boats. It will deter people from coming here. It will create a new duty on the Home Secretary to deport anyone who is here illegally. And indeed, it makes it impossible to claim asylum if you come here illegally. I think it's totally the right piece of legislation. But in the Lords, Labour and the Lib Dems are fighting it tooth and nail, even though that is clearly what most people in this country want. People want to see our borders strengthened. They want to see the small boats stopped, because it's not fair, even for people who've come here legally, including my constituents. They've jumped through all the hoops, they've played by the rules, and these people just forcing their way in illegally, risking their lives in many cases, supporting a criminal trade. So we've got to stop these small boats, and our piece of legislation will do that. But at the moment, we are facing a lot of resistance from Labour and Lib Dems in the Lords, and I hope we can overcome that. Just talk to me about
this Privileges Committee report before I let you go. It looks as though potentially there'll be some criticism of those that were not necessarily using the right tactics in supporting the former Prime Minister, Boris Johnson. We'll hear about it probably about 9 o'clock or thereabouts. Likely to be criticism for people like Nadine Dorries, Jacob Rees-Mogg, etc. How damaging is this for you as a party?
So ultimately, the Privileges Committee is a matter for the House. It's a House matter. And the House had its say on Monday. It voted to support the report. And as a government, obviously, we are focused on delivering the keys.
Behaving badly. Conservative MPs behaving badly again.
Well, as a government, we are totally focused on getting on with the PM's priorities of getting inflation down, cutting NHS waiting lists.
I knew you were going to give me the
stopping
list.
But that is what we're focused on, rather than...
Meantime, we're having to focus... That's what you want us to focus on. And meantime,
that's what we want to focus on for the public.
Yeah, and meantime, again, we're talking about Tory MPs behaving badly.
Yeah. Ultimately, on Boris Johnson, the House had its say the other day, voted for the censure. He's now gone not just as Prime Minister, but as an MP. And I say this as somebody who resigned because I didn't think that things were being done right during Boris's time in office. He went as PM, he's now gone as an MP. But ultimately, we have to move on from all the back and forth about Boris Johnson. We've got to focus on the issues of now, getting inflation down, stopping the small boats that we've just been talking about, and cutting NHS waiting lists. Those are the things when I'm on the doorsteps that people ask me about, rather than the umpteenth iteration of all this stuff.
Well, we'll have to see what happens at 9 o'clock. It's always a pleasure, Minister. Thanks very much.